So, oh, and there's a recording in process. Yeah, if you're feeling a bit more kind of, you know, I mean, it's evening. You've had the whole day to look wonderful and marvelous there. I'm the one who should look rough. It's really early in the morning. So,
sorry, I don't have a camera.
Oh, thanks, Reese. Thanks. But your voice sounds very attractive, Reese. So we all know that, you know, I'm sure you're a wonderful person. Anyway, on to some gin, shall we? Yeah, Edinburgh Gin. I thought we should start things off with the classic gin, with this one here. So yeah, you should have your various samples and things there. We're going to kick things off with the classic gin. And I know that you're a whiskey club. You're whiskey drinkers, you probably think, you know, oh, gin, I just shove it in a glass, pour some tonic and some ice on top and off I go. But we're going to treat this gin a little bit more like a whiskey. We're really going to sample it, we're really going to savor it. So I don't know what we're doing for glasses. Maybe you want to show your glasses to the camera. I've got my Edinburgh Gin tumbler here. I see the rest of you've got your whiskey nosing glasses. I'm with the professionals here, of course I am. And you've already prepared yourself and poured your measure out. I'm just going to pour wee measure for myself there. So first things first, we're going to nose our whiskey. Now it is still whiskey. We're going to nose our gin. It is 43%. So you didn't want to shove your nose right in there because, you know, you're just going to get the burn of the alcohol there. So again, I'm preaching to the choir here, but if you can, what I quite like to do is bring my nose right under my nose, and rather than breathing through my nose, breathing through my mouth instead, and you get the flavour towards the back of your palate. Or the Americans do a quite popular one, they do the drive-by, so you could do that for your nosing as well if you want to, so whatever works for you. But yeah, first off, let's get to grips with the actual smell of it. And yeah, this is the classic gin. And yeah, stick your comments in the chat box there. Are you getting anything in particular? Would you say it's light, it's heavy, it's soft, it's rough? Are you just getting the burn of the alcohol? Do you get nothing else? Are you getting a really ginny smell? And that's not a wrong answer if you are, and I'll talk about why that is a right answer in a bit. But I would really say the kind of primary thing with gin is with taste. I would say gin is about 90% taste, 10% smell. People might argue with me on that, but we're actually going to try it neat next. So again, 43% alcohol. So treat it with respect. A little tiny sip, let it sit in your tongue for about 10 seconds. Let it get all around your palate and then swallow. Cheers, everyone. Slange. I love that I'm drinking gin at 8 o'clock in the morning. This is brilliant. So where are you getting the sensation of that on your palate? Are you getting it at the front of your palate? Are you getting it at the back of your palate? Are you getting it on the roof of your mouth? Again, stick your comments in the chat box there. Let myself or Craig know. For me, I'm getting a kind of a sort of sweet, sharp sensation towards the front edges of my tongue. There's a kind of a sweetness. There's a kind of citrus burst almost that I'm getting at the very front of my palate, which is then starting to sort of linger towards the back there as well. Now, we are going to stick our rice and tonic and all that stuff in there, but, and I don't know if we'd stuck this in the notes there for you, garnish. Craig, did we say to folks about garnish at all on this? I can't remember if we did.
We haven't said anything about garnish tonight. We do have a garnish to go with the cocktail, but that's okay. All. So
if you happen to be a super organized person, or if you have a fruit bowl to hand, if you've got an orange in your house and a peeler, run away and get them just now. If not an orange, lemon, a lime would also do, but I would say orange is the recommended for Edinburgh Gin. I can see on John and Stacey's camera and Danny's people racing off. That's okay. I'll pad till you guys get here. But once you have an orange, oh, look at that, Danny. Is that, show to the camera, is that an orange you've got there, or is that a lime? Oh, it is an orange. It was just very green on the bottom. Okay. Oh, look at you organised people with your oranges. Okay, so we're going to not chop up the orange. We're going to have a peel of orange instead. And again, for the rest of you, as I say, we didn't really give you advanced warning of this, so don't worry. This is just something you can do at home when you buy a full bottle of the gin. You can have a practice like this. But anyway, you should now have a peel of orange here, and you've got your neat gin here. We're going to give that peel a little twist and pop it in there with the neat gin. Okay. And we're going to do exactly what we did before. We're going to go back and we're going to have a little gentle sip. So 10 seconds on the palate, and you should have the orange peel in now. Now, for those who've got their oranges there, for Stacey, for Danny, has that changed it for you? For me, it has. Yeah, again, stick your comments in the chat box there. For me, it's lightened it, and it's brought it further into my palate. And I think this is what's really interesting, and this is something that you should get into the habit of if you're not doing this already, is whenever you're having any gin, and I don't just mean Edinburgh gin, any gin, when you're trying it for the first time, try it neat, try it with the garnish, and then try it with your tonic and ice. And then you'll kind of get to grips more with the actual flavour of the gin, of the botanicals that are in there, the different flavours that are coming out. We'll talk about the botanicals that are in this in a second. We're going to have some tonic now. If you're really organised, you might have ice as well. Tonic-wise, I've gone for a nice Scottish tonic. You might know this one, Craig. Bon Accord. Sfi Aberdeen, Fusio Doos. That's my Aberdonian accent. Yeah, it's a really nice tonic. It's one we use a lot at the distillery because it's really light. It's not so heavy on quinine as a lot of the other tonics, so it lets the kind of flavour of the gin come through. Now, in a normal tasting situation, if you're just doing little samples, I would say put in as much tonic as there is gin, or twice as much. But if you're making a full drink out of this, then you can go a bit more. You can have a sort of maybe 1/3 of your drink is, sorry, 1/4 of your drink is your gin, the other 3/4 are your tonic. So you can go for that kind of ratio. I reckon that's enough for me. So you should have the classic gin with a splash of tonic, orange peel for garnish, and some ice. And cheers. So, the classic gin. Well, this is it here. And yeah, classic gin. Various things going on in there, really. These are the kind of official tasting notes. I said earlier, there was a kind of clean, fresh spice notes, the official kind of tasting thing. And there, for me, some of that citrus kind of zinginess is coming in early on. Actually, even more so on the palate. I was saying to you earlier, if you're saying it tastes very ginny, that's exactly what's going on there. It's that juniper thing coming through. We'll talk more about that in a bit as well. Lavender in there as well. Originally, we used to use heather in this gin, but when we started to get really successful and scale things up, we found heather tends to be quite a volatile botanical, so we switched to lavender instead. But again, the lavender in there and also the fresh pine buds in there are giving it a little bit of a Scottish flavour. The other big thing in this is citrus. It has orange peel in it, it has bitter orange peel. It's got lemongrass and it's got lime peel as well. So I would say it's a very citrus forward gin, and that's why we tend to recommend orange peel as the recommended garnish on this. But again, it's a personal preference thing. I don't like to dictate too much on how you should drink a particular gin. That's why it's always good to try something neat first, because you can go, I know Phil said this would go really well with orange, but actually I think the lime would bring out more of the kind of sharpness of it. So whatever you want to do, really. And then, yeah, that lovely smooth finish there as well. So amongst the botanicals that we've got distilling in the pot, we've got hazelnuts going in there, and we've got milk thistle seeds. Now, you might know milk thistle because it's supposed to be a very good cure for a hangover. I'm afraid our gin will not cure your hangover, sorry. But that and the hazelnuts are both very oily, very viscous, so it's giving it that really nice texture. That's important in a gin and tonic, but even more important in a martini or a Negroni or something like that, I would say. So, yeah, that is our classic gin. And Craig, are you drinking along with us? What are your thoughts on this gin? I assume you've had this gin before?
Yeah, I like it in regards to the freshness in the nose of it. I don't drink tonic at all. I usually have soda water with any gin that I have. I'm not sure, I just can't connect with the tonic.
Oh, there it is. I've got it now.
But I think that sort of the freshness of the nose on it, the palate's that nice florally note, and it's interesting when you said it's like Scotland, and it sort of reminds me of like a nice fresh morning on your paper round when you were a kid, and just this beautiful floral note of the trees round about you, and that's what it reminded me of when I drank it. So it was really peculiar, and I don't think I've really had that with the gin before, which is really strange. But that reminiscent note of just the smell and the taste reminded me of that, and going on my paper round in the morning.
You can tell you're a whiskey drinker because you've already got that emotional memory thing with the flavors and the smells. That's fantastic. And again, really perceptive as well, picking up those kind of floral kind of things too. Fab.
I don't know the orange peel, but everybody's saying what a great idea it is just to put the orange peel in it, not to use the tonic yet, or to mix it, just to try it with that real citrus accompaniment. And I mean, it's definitely something I've never tried before either.
Exactly. And I mean, this is the thing. I think a whole wedge of fruit can quite often overpower the flavour of the gin, but a peel is just that bit more delicate. It's complementing the flavours rather than potentially drowning them out. So yeah, that's always been our kind of recommended thing with any of our gins is to use peel rather than wedge, unless a little bit later, rhubarb and ginger, that is such a strong flavoured gin. Can get away with a fruit wedge on that, but that's one of the few where you can, I think. So yeah, no, I think it's just a gorgeous, very drinkable gin, which is kind of what you want, really. So whilst you're sipping away at that, I thought we'd talk a little bit about Edinburgh and gin, if that's okay, because Edinburgh, Scotland has a really long association with gin. I know I don't sound very Scottish, by the way. I just went to a posh school to sort of kick the accent out of me, in case anyone's wondering. But Scotland does have a very long association with gin. And even to this day, 70% of the gin made in the UK is made in Scotland. And Edinburgh is the gin and tonic capital of the UK. We drink more gin per head of population in Edinburgh than any other city in the UK, although I'm probably partly responsible for that figure, I think. But the actual tradition of distilling and making of gin goes a really long way back as well. And it starts with, I mentioned it earlier, this magical stuff here, juniper. Juniper is what makes gin gin. If it hasn't got this stuff in, then sorry, you're drinking vodka. Juniper grows almost everywhere in the world, but we don't actually use Scottish juniper in our gins. Although it grows here, the juniper berries that grow here tend to be quite small, quite bitter, and you only get one yield a year from the plant. So we head to southern Europe for our juniper. We either use juniper from Italy or from North Macedonia, just above Greece. And there is a difference. The North Macedonian tends to be sweeter, jammier, and it might not surprise you that that's what's in the classic gin. Whereas the Italian, that tends to be a bit more peppery, a bit more spicy, and the gin we've got coming up in a little bit has Italian juniper in it. So people are distilling with juniper, and they're making this distilled drink with juniper because it's seen as a very powerful medicinal plant, even a cure for baldness at some stages. I do rub some into my bald patch, but it's not working. Yeah, thanks for the sympathy, everyone. We have this distilled drink with juniper in it, but we don't call it gin. We call it aqua vitae, the water of life. The idea being if you drink enough gin, you live forever. Sounds pretty good. Now, being the kind of club that you are, you'll know that we don't call aqua vitae in Scotland. We call it by its Gaelic name. Don't know how your Gaelic is. Kimera how? Ishmisha Philip? No? Okay. The Scots Gaelic for aqua vitae, apologies for my pronunciation, is uskabe, which gets shortened to the word whiskey. And this surprises a lot of people, but actually the original version of what we now call Scotch was much closer to gin. And those clues are there with areas in Edinburgh like juniper green. So we're obviously growing the stuff here. I am also a whiskey drinker. One of the ones I like, Tomatin whiskey, you might know that one. That is Gaelic for hill of the juniper. So it has a much more ancient history in Scotland than people realise. Now, really, the Dutch are seen as the ones who are the originators of our modern day gin, and they name it after the main ingredient, juniper, but the Dutch word for juniper is jenever, spelled with a G. That's quite hard for us to say. We're not very good at saying foreign words here, so we don't call it jenever, we call it genever. That's still really hard for us to say, particularly when we've had a few, so that gets shortened to gin, and that's where the actual kind of the modern day word for gin comes from. So the Dutch are making this version of modern gin, and where does it come to in the UK? Well, it comes to Edinburgh. Why is that? Well, the English were having a war with the Dutch at the time, and it's often the case, if England are having a war with someone, we tend to trade with those people. There's usually a bit of money to be made out of that situation. So the main port for all Dutch goods in the UK was Leith in Edinburgh, and it's where some of the first gin distilleries in the UK started as well. I'll talk about our stills later, but our main still, Gin Genie, big David Bowie fans here at Edinburgh Gin, Gin Genie is in Leith, and we were the first distillery to copper pot distill again in Leith in just over 100 years. So in our own way, bringing gin making back to its spiritual birthplace in Scotland. And from the moment it arrives here, everybody is drinking this stuff. I mean, people gave gin to their babies in those days. That wasn't seen as a weird thing. It's late at night where you guys are, so I think I can tell you this fact. My favourite fact during this period, this is the 18th century, gin was promoted as a marital aid. The idea was couples having problems in the bedroom department. The husband was encouraged to have a few shots of gin, and it was like he was a young man all over again, which I know sounds silly. I mean, from experience, to say the only thing gin gets up is your hopes. Sorry. Anyway, sorry, moving on. Yes, it is a very popular drink, and everyone is drinking it. And at this point, it becomes part of life in the Navy. Now, we'll talk a bit more about this later, but basically every sailor, depending on their rank, was being given a ration of rum or gin. So rum for the crew, gin for the officers. And they were having a tot every day. And we think a tot was equivalent to 3 of our doubles today. So, I mean, I've been suggesting that at Edinburgh Gin, we all just have 3 doubles of gin every day at work, and I think we'll just sail through our shifts. I think it would be quite a good move. Now, we're going to keep that idea in your head, so we're going to come back to the Navy and gin a little bit later. But it's also at this same period in time, Edinburgh makes its biggest impact on the story of gin. Like I said, we're in the 18th century. It's a period called the Scottish Enlightenment. At this point, Edinburgh is kind of seen as the cultural centre of the world. Various discoveries happening in the city, like economics and the encyclopedia, lots of useless things. But more importantly, gin is being developed. And one of those discoveries happens with this chap here, George Cleghorn. Loving the wig there, George. George is actually comes from quite a sort of humble background. He's the son of a farmer just on the edge of the city at Granton. And he's one of these annoying people. He's these annoying, intelligent people. So at the age of 14, George gets admitted into the medical school in Edinburgh, which was the top medical school in Europe at the time. And he makes such an impression that the head of the medical school actually takes him in and he lives with him and he pays for his education. And so George does all that. And then at the age of 17, proper overachiever, at the age of 17, he graduates, he gets his first job, and that is as surgeon to the regiment of foot who are stationed in Minorca. Now, Minorca is the kind of place that you might go to for your holidays nowadays, but it was a quite sort of wild and scary place back then. So George is there and he notices that the locals, they're taking the bark of the cinchona tree every day, and he wonders why they're doing this. But then he also notices that the British soldiers who are stationed there are all dying of malaria, and the locals aren't. So George takes this bark from this cinchona tree, and you might be thinking to yourself, I've never heard of a cinchona tree, Phil. Well, the locals didn't call it a cinchona tree, they called it a fever tree. You can see where we're going. So George takes this down, he distills it down in his lab, and he comes up with this stuff called quinine. And quinine, as we mentioned earlier, is the main ingredient in tonic water. It's what gives it its bitter flavour. So George takes this, he writes a book about his big discovery. It's a bestseller, it's reprinted 4 times in his lifetime. And as a result of this, every soldier and every sailor is given a daily ration of quinine. Now, quinine is one of the most bitter things there is. So in order to make it more palatable, they just tipped it into their gin, and the gin and tonic is born. So you can say that Edinburgh has a part in the G&T. However, it's not the only connection that Edinburgh has. So we've got another surgeon, about 20 years later, he just grew up around the corner actually on Princes Street, and his name was James Lind. And he gets a job in the Navy on board the HMS Salisbury, where there's an outbreak of scurvy. And James has quite an unusual idea. He decides to swap out the sailors' diets for different things there. So there is James shoving some stuff into a scurvy-ridden sailor's mouth. Lovely image there. Do you know, you could actually buy China figurines of this image. When I was Googling images for this, you can buy them on eBay, which I kind of want one in my house. But anyway, James Lind, he has the idea to swap out these sailors' diets. And he gives some of them beer, he gives some of them seawater, he gives some of them sulfuric acid, believe it or not, and some of them are given oranges and lemons. And they all die, except the ones who have the oranges and lemons. They survive. And it was, in fact, the first clinical trial in medical history. We hear a lot about clinical trials these days, but they were invented in Edinburgh. And as a result of this, every sailor starts to have citrus fruit as part of their daily ration. But they didn't have fridges and freezers in those days. They didn't have a way of preserving them until a guy from, yes, you guessed it, Edinburgh, has the idea that you can preserve citrus fruit in sugar. His name was Lachlan Rose, so he calls his invention Rose's Lime Cordial. You might have seen that behind many a bar. So the sailors have their gin, they have their quinine, and they have their citrus garnish invented and made in Edinburgh. And you have a gin and tonic with citrus garnish invented in Edinburgh. So when people say to me, oh, gin, it's a bit of an English thing, I go, no, we flipping invented the stuff. So that's why we make gin in Edinburgh. So we're going to move on to our, thank you, John, for my little round of applause there. Thank you. We're going to move on to our next gin. And I talked about gin being part of the sailors' daily rations. Well, they used to keep the gin down in the hold. And the problem with that was the ship was rocking about at sea and it would spill in the hold. It would spill onto the gunpowder and the gunpowder would become damp. It wouldn't fire. Until they had the idea that if they actually made their gin so alcoholic that it was actually flammable, Navy strength, if it spilled on the gunpowder would still fire afterwards. They could have just moved the gunpowder, that would have been much simpler. But anyway, it brings us on to our next gin, which is a Navy strength gin. It is our Cannonball gin. So if you haven't already, pour yourself a wee sample. And you read that right, 57.2% alcohol. We're not messing about with this one. See if I've got a bottle behind my bar. I do. So, Cannonball gin. There are lots of Navy strength gins out there, but this one is a particularly nice one, and I'll tell you why in a sec. But we're going to do everything that we did before with the first gin. So, pour yourself a wee measure if you haven't already, and then do what we did before. Bring it up to your nose, give it a wee smell, or you can stick it right into your nose and breathe it through your mouth instead. And again, those same questions. Is it rough? Is it smooth? Is it sharp? Is it light? You know, are you just getting the alcohol? Are you just getting, oh my God, it burns, it burns? I mean, what would you say are your initial notes on this? Again, feel free to stick them in the chat box, let myself and Craig know. And then pour yourself out a wee measure and do exactly what we did before, a little tiny sip. Let it sit in your tongue there for about 10 seconds or so. Let it get all around your palate and then swallow. So, Craig, for whiskey drinkers, this is the gin I always recommend because it's like the cask strength whiskey of gins, I would say. Yeah,
yeah, and certainly I think when you're drinking like we do quite a bit of whiskey, your palate gets used to that cask strength, you know, that's the high intensity spirit note. Tend to yeah, you get more from the whiskey, I generally think, you know, when it's got more aroma from that alcohol, the higher alcohol evaporating. But I mean, I do like that. I don't feel that it's powerful at all, unfortunately.
You've dulled your senses over the years.
It's actually quite nice though, because what I'm getting there is that I get this sort of chili spice on there, and I really like that red, like a red chili, and I get that sort of spice on the nose. And I find that when I've got red chili, it really draws me back to a meal. Like it's really, it's a great flavor as a, you know, right at the start of a meal, as it's on the top of the meal. That's what this reminds me of so far. So I like that. But yeah, I mean, for some people, it's going to be.
It's interesting you say that. You're right. It has got the nose of chili, but it doesn't have, for me anyway, it doesn't have the taste of it. It's a much more rounder spice taste in what you'd get with chili, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, normally when I do this with people who are just gin drinkers, there's sometimes a bit of a face when they try this neat because it's a bit of a shock to the system. But of those of you who have your cameras on, I mean, yeah, you're clearly veteran whiskey drinkers, because yeah, not a thing there, not a flicker. You were like, this is fine. This is water.
On the initial, as it hits your palate, I just get this burst of fruit on it for some, like just this big burst of fruit which sort of dries on the palate really quickly. But yeah,
that doesn't. Oh, Craig, what a palate you've got, Craig. There is a reason for that. Again, we didn't give you prep on this, but if you happen to have a lemon in your house within easy reach, lemon peel would be the recommended garnish for this. Or I see some people having a quick look round. Do I have a lemon? Or maybe John's running.
I'll get a lemon.
I'll have to get a lemon. Brilliant. Craig, even Craig's got a lemon. Fantastic. Lemon peel was, I should say, one of the big botanicals in this. And yeah, lemon peel we recommend as a garnish to kind of complement that. So again, go back and try and eat with a little twist of lemon peel in there if you can. Otherwise, feel free to kind of move on to adding your tonic next if you haven't already. I'll bring up our tasting notes on this.
So what, when you're making this one, then what is it that goes into it? How do you create it? What are the botanicals? Are you going to go into that?
I've brought a few of them up here on the side here, Craig, and you can. The kind of big thing with this is normally when people make Navy strength gins, they tend to just take their classic gin and not dilute it as much. And the problem with that is you're drinking a gin at a strength it was never designed to be drunk at, you know. And usually Navy strength gins can be quite harsh and not especially enjoyable. But I think what's really nice about this one is that we've taken some really strong flavors. So we've taken Italian juniper. Remember I mentioned that earlier, the spicier juniper. We've got Szechuan peppercorns in there. We've got cardamom, and we used to use lemon peel, but actually we've just switched that over to yuzu peel, which I think is what you guys will have over in Australia, because I think you've got one of the more recent batches sent over there. So it was interesting when you were talking about that kind of fruitiness, because to me, yuzu, if you're familiar with it from Asian cooking, is just like a supercharged lemon. But that's the idea, is you've got strong alcohol, strong flavors, hit the two together, and you have an undeniably strong, very smooth gin. I mean, I don't know about you, Craig, but I actually could drink this neat, maybe with an ice cube or two in.
Yeah, I think with the lemon in it, you know, really good. Yeah, it just is something that you could just sip on. I think what you need though, when you have something like a fine gin, when a lot of people drink it, it's quite an open glass they use. And I think for this, you need that. You need a bigger glass, you know, to enjoy it. You know, so just to let it open up and breathe a bit more. But yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any comments on this one at all? Is this a favourite with whiskey drinkers?
Reese says, bit strong, neat for my liking. Prefer the classic so far.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think that this would be nice mixed with a soda or a tonic. Like it would really be nice and refreshing, and it give you a lot of flavour from that, from the botanicals being used, and you just got to pick the right liquid to have with it, to really.
So what's great about this gin is it's quite punchy, not only in strength but also in flavour. And a habit that I don't like is in some bars they put the tonic in for you. They don't give you the option to put in the amount of tonic that you'd like. And I find if I go to a bar where they just pour the whole bottle in, then this is still going to get through a whole bottle of tonic, because it is that much more punchy.
They tend not to do that, like in whiskey bars or like spirits bars in Australia now. They tend to, I mean, we use a lot of Fever Tree tonic here, and they tend to give you the bottle with it. So they put it on the side, and then they give you the bottle alongside, so you can pour yours as you go. Big bars that are sort of just selling you something, like maybe not spirit sort of bars, etc. They just they'll just pour it straight in. But it's good to have it on the side and just decide how much you want.
I totally agree. And I to be fair, I'm probably being a bit mean, because that used to be more of a problem, but it has got much better now. That folk are letting you put your own tonic in. I mean, now you go to a lot of bars in Edinburgh and they go, and which tonic would you like? And they've got a whole range of tonics to pick from, as well as gins, which is pretty cool. Also, this is a great one for really traditional gin-forward cocktails. So things like martinis, Negronis, stuff like that, because it is so smooth and it's so ginny as well. This has, I think it's more than twice the amount of juniper in it that our classic has. So it is a very ginny gin. I mean, it's got so much juniper in it that if we actually bottled this at 43%, like we do the classic, then it would look almost like milk. It would be so oily, you would get what's called louching. And it would just be this kind of weird sort of white, kind of hazy look. But because we're bottling it at that much stronger, we're able to put a bit more juniper in there and get away with it. So, well, I thought this might be the favourite amongst the whiskey drinkers, but maybe not. I mean, I always think the classic gets forgotten about a bit, so I'm kind of glad that there are people who are really liking the classic too. So that's our native strength gin. I feel like I need to fill you in with a little bit more kind of gin history before we kind of move on with things. So obviously the 18th century is that big period for kind of gin in Scotland, and that popularity kind of carries on from there. The unfortunate thing is a lot of people are drinking gin in the 18th century, to the point where people are just getting pissed all the time and not going to work, which is most weeks for me. And, it becomes a bit of a problem, to be honest. This kind of gin craze that you've probably heard of, all these kind of images you might have heard of or seen. And they start to bring in laws to make it harder to distill. 1753, I believe it is, there's a register done of distilling in Edinburgh, and there are 8 licensed distilleries and over 400 unlicensed distilleries. So there is a lot of kind of illegal distilling going on in the city at the time. And it was mainly just people making gin in their homes. A bit like my granny might have a stock pot or a soup pot going on in the kitchen just throughout the day while she's doing stuff. That was what you did in those days. You just had a little gin still going on in the kitchen, and you just did your distillation for the day and dished out the gin to the family at the end of the day. So that was the kind of sort of standard thing. But as I say, they start to bring in laws to make it harder to do that. I mean, saying that, in the 19th century, gin is still very much a big thing. In fact, the Victorians, they build these amazing places to drink their gin in. They're called gin palaces, and they have chandeliers and stained glass windows and these new things called bars, which you can walk up to and order your drink from. And they're never going to take off. So as I say, it was still part of culture then too, in a big way. But as we head into the 20th century, other spirits come along, particularly vodka, and it means that gin starts to lose some of its popularity. Gin starts to get seen as your granny's favourite drink, the Queen Mother's favourite tipple, It's not really seen as a kind of cool, fashionable sort of drink. And then suddenly, it just becomes massive again. It becomes almost as big as it was in its heyday in the 18th century. So how does that happen? Well, I said that they were trying to clamp down on illegal distilling. Well, they did, and they brought in a whole series of gin acts and gin laws that made it very hard to distill. And those laws existed until 2009. Up until then, you couldn't craft distill, which is what we do at Edinburgh Gin, distill on a small scale. You could not legally craft distill. So the only distilleries that existed in the UK, certainly until 2009, were the really, really big ones. But then the law changed. Anybody could make gin on a still at any scale, even the little ones like the one next to me here. And so suddenly there is this big explosion of gin making. In the first few years, there's maybe 4 or 5 new distilleries open up every year. Now it's something like, 20 or 30 or 40 or whatever each year are opening up, and it's just growing and growing and growing. And it changes as well. It becomes a more respectable thing as well. It's not this kind of backdoor mother's ruin kind of thing, gin. It's a very respectable thing. You can go to university, you can study to become a distiller, and the best place to do it is, yes, you guessed it, Edinburgh. Edinburgh is the place to learn to be a distiller. Now, you, again, knowing a bit about spirits, you might know this already. Edinburgh is home to Heriot-Watt University, which is home to the International Centre for Brewing and Distilling. It's the only place in the UK where you can get a master's in distilling, and it's only one of a handful of places in the world where you can get that. And we have a really strong link with Heriot-Watt University, and it's kind of like a work experience scheme. It's a bit more involved in that. We call it a knowledge transfer partnership. And basically the students will come in and they'll work with us on a gin that we're developing. Or in some cases, the students will actually make their own gin themselves from scratch. And one of those gins was our Seaside gin. So there is Dave, our head distiller. And that's him down by the beach with the students from Heriot-Watt University. And basically what we said to them was, right, we would like a gin that encapsulates the east coast of Scotland. So they went down to the beach at Dunbar, just south of Edinburgh. If any of you have been around here, Dunbar is officially the sunniest place in Scotland. So lovely place to go to for your holidays. But they went all around the beaches in Dunbar, picked various botanicals from the beaches there, and they came up with our Seaside gin. And if you haven't already, pour yourself a wee swally of this and give it a wee taste. And again, everything that we did before. Give it a smell, give it a sip. So Seaside gin, and you can probably see from some of the kind of botanicals there as well. And again, as you can see in the side there, recommended garnish with this is grapefruit peel. I'm asking a lot of your fruit bowl if you happen to have grapefruit lying around in the house. If you do, amazing. I might go have some for my breakfast after this. Yeah, grapefruit peel and thyme is normally the recommended garnish on this one. And again, if you're a fever tree tonic person, I would say the Mediterranean fever tree tonic is a good pairing tonic with this. But the students went and picked various botanicals from the beach there in Dunbar, in sunny Dunny, and they got bladderwrack seaweed, which there's probably a version that grows on the Australian coast. It kind of pops a bit like bubble wrap when you stand on it. It actually tastes quite nice. It tastes like salty cabbage. I quite like eating it. And they also picked scurvy grass, which doesn't give you scurvy. It's supposed to be a cure for it. It's a thin, wiry grass that grows on the top of sand dunes. It's a member of the mustard and horseradish family. So there's a little bit of spice coming from that. And there's ground ivy as well, which is a kind of ivy that grows at the base of sea cliffs. It's related to parsley, so a slight herbal flavour from that. And you can maybe see that in the tasting notes there as well. It's talking about this kind of minerality. There's a kind of umami, if we're going to use posh words, umami. There's kind of that salinity going on there. But you add some grapefruit, you add some tonic, particularly the Mediterranean tonic, and the gin really transforms. It really opens out. Lemon would also work for this if you've got a lemon kicking around in the house. It opens out the gin, and it kind of becomes a gin of two characters, really. You can either have a very kind of minerally, sort of saline kind of drink with it. You could make a dirty martini, makes a cracking dirty martini. You could maybe make a gimlet, very traditional kind of naval drink there. Or you can go the other way with it. Big copper glass, lots of ice, big bit of grapefruit peel, sprig of thyme or rosemary, Mediterranean tonic on a hot sunny day. It's the perfect, I would actually argue it's almost more refreshing than the classic in a gin and tonic in that setup. Craig, I don't know if you had garnish with you there. You just sampling that neat and then with a splash of tonic, or did you happen to have lemon or grapefruit kicking around?
Was it me you were talking to there? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any, no garnish. What was that? I'm just trying to neat. I've tried a lot of seaside gins because when I go back home to Scotland, it tends to be what I want to try. I feel as though as I go around the coast to a lot of the distilleries on the coast, they have very different seaside gin. I tried Aaron's seaside gin recently, and then Harris gin. I feel as though this one's really much softer than them, and on the nose I sort of get more of a curry, those curry spices on the nose, and
that goes back to that scurvy grass. So it's the kind of mustard horseradish thing. The other botanical I didn't mention is grains of paradise in there too. So again, that's giving that sort of spicy curry note there too.
Yeah. So where do the grains of paradise come from?
They're from the west coast of Africa. So kind of round that,
yeah.
What's that bit called? The bit where it kind of tucks in, you know, that bit.
Yeah. But yeah, and then the flavour though for me is it's very light. So what tonic would you have with this? I would surely that's a
yeah. So as I say, the recommended tonic is the Fever Tree Mediterranean, and that is if you want to open out the gin more and make a more sort of refreshing gin and tonic with it. But if you want to keep some of that slight spice there, some of that saline thing, I would say a light tonic would be the better pairing.
Yeah. I mean, Jason said smells dirty, pleasant feel and taste. Reese agrees. I think yeah, I like that. I get more of a spice on that nose, so I quite like that, like curried spice, etc. And then, but yeah, definitely on the palate, really nice, really silky, you know, and it's not too strong. I've tasted a lot of really strong seaside seaweed gins, and sometimes it can just taste like seawater, where that is definitely not where that's going. It's going in that position of it's got class, you know.
Thank you. No, I mean that's the thing. It's a little bit Jekyll and Hyde like that. You can be quite salty with it if you want to. So I was in the distillery last night, and one of the guides there, Chloe, is also a very experienced cocktail maker. She was like, Phil, I've made this cocktail. I really want you to try it. I was like, okay. And she had got Seaside. She had rosemary syrup in there, and there was grapefruit juice. And that was it, I think. And then one side of the glass she'd rimmed with sea salt, and the other she hadn't at all. And you sipped it on the non-salty side, and you were like, oh, this is incredibly refreshing. This is delicious. And you tried it on the other salty side, and suddenly it was really briny. It was really it was bringing out that other side to the gin. So yeah, that's what I love about it as a gin. It can go both ways, you know.
Yeah, I've got a party on Saturday night. I've just written down. I'm going to do that.
Fantastic.
Right, it's me. Yeah.
Yeah, this is our second best-selling gin after the classic, which, given it started out as a student project, we only made a couple of hundred bottles. The fact that it's just grown and grown and grown, and the 4 students who helped make it, they're all doing quite big things in the industry now. If you really know your distilleries, Caitlin, she's head of Eau Claire Distillery, which is in Calgary now, yeah, we like to think that they're sort of doing the jobs they're doing now because they've got I invented Seaside on their CV. That's what we like to tell ourselves anyway. So.
Very good.
Yeah. Now, I've been waffling for a while. Are there any burning questions that we have at this stage, or shall I jump into talking about distilling for a little bit? You okay? Yeah? I don't see any sir, hands up, so that's fine. That's a good sign. Okay. Right, well, stills. These are our stills. So yeah, I've got Caledonia and I've got Flora, and you probably recognise Flora. Flora is what you might call a pot still. So if you know, like whiskey stills and things like that, that very much kind of classic designer still. Cali, she's a little bit more unusual. She's what's known as a Lomond or hybrid still. So actually a Scottish designer still, invented in Fife in the 19th century, and like a lot of people from Fife who were trying to save money. Sorry, that's a very Scottish joke, sorry. And they invented a still that could do 2 jobs in one. We've got Flora and Cali there, and we'll talk more about the kind of process of those in a sec. And then we've got Gin Genie, who, I mean, she's a bit more of a workhorse of a still. You can sort of see there, Cali and Flora, really pretty stills. They were, well, we'll see in a sec, but Gin Genie, a bit more of a workhorse. She makes the classic, she makes the Seaside, she makes the gins that go into our liqueurs and stuff like that. But we love her too. So here we are in our distillery, and this is Cali and Flora, as I mentioned here. Now, as you can see there, they are beautiful stills, 45 grand each they cost, made by Carl, based in Stuttgart. Really one of the best still makers in the world, certainly for gin stills, hand hammered. I don't know if you can see that very well in the footage there, but yeah, gorgeous stills. So we're actually going to head into the still room. In we go. And first off, we've got things like this. I mean, it's a small operation, but it's still very much a working still room. So these are Dave's hydrometers. Again, if you've been in distilleries, you'll know a bit about these. They're what we use for kind of measuring the alcohol content there. And then Dave's got his kind of chart there as well for ticking off things. This is more for tax reasons as much as anything else. So HMRC, I'm getting into not getting into any bother with them. But yeah, so as I say, once we've done all the distilling and we've done all the measuring here, we stick the gin into big barrels, and that goes to Broxburn, just outside Edinburgh, Broxburn bottlers, and that's where all the diluting and bottling and all that kind of stuff gets done. So yeah, this is the lovely Flora. So first off, you've got the heat jacket down there, and that's what you actually use to heat up the contents of the still. But before all that, you'll have your botanicals, and you'll have your neutral grain spirits as well. And they're going to go in that main part there in the head of the still, which you can see on my phone there. I was trying to sort of get you an idea of how it looked inside the still. But luckily, I had some footage that I'd used earlier off the still with all the botanicals in. So with the magic of cinema, hopefully when I open this, it will be suddenly full. Bow! There we go. There we are. Dave's much slower at opening it than me. There we are. So there's all our lovely botanicals there, having a good soak, having a macerate overnight. We've got the juniper, we've got the coriander in there. So they'll have a good old soak. And then after about 12 hours of maceration, we'll turn on the heat jacket underneath. That'll heat up the contents of the still. That will turn into vapor, and it'll pass up through the helmet of the still. And up there, just where my hand is, that's where we put in tea bags for the lighter botanicals, things like lavender and pine buds I mentioned earlier. They would burn if they were in the main pot of the still. So that's in there. That's all kind of bubbling away. I'm just trying to remember where I went with my camera there. There we go. So it's bubbling away, it's turning into vapor, passing up through the helmet of the still, taking on the flavour in the tea bags, and then coming up along this pipe, along the line arm, and then eventually coming into the condenser. The condenser, you've got copper pipes surrounded by cold water. So when that vapor hits the cold, bang, it turns back into liquid, and it comes out these taps at the bottom here as gin. And you'll notice the shot glass at the side there. Dave, our head distiller, he is actually trying each batch as it comes through. It comes into one of those very glamorous buckets over there. Because there are the different cut points to the distillation. I can talk a bit about those in a sec as well, if you like, as well. The heads, the hearts, and the tails. And this is where we're actually doing that tasting. We're kind of tasting the gin as it goes along. And then, yeah, this is the lovely Caledonia. So Caledonia, she can distill gins, and we will use her for distilling. But we can only do more punchy, strong flavoured gins in Cali because she doesn't have a big kind of bulbous head like Flora does. So Cali will make Cannonball in, we'll make our Christmas gin in, and when we're not doing that, we will rectify, we will recycle in Cali. So this is all for the tails, this is for the kind of leftover stuff at the end of distillation. So the tails tend to be quite gross, not really good for making gin out of. So we'll put those into the main body of the still, and then we'll flip over these levers here. They operate Cali's bubble plates, kind of metal plates with small holes in. And once we've heated everything up, that will push the tails up through these holes, creates gas bubbles, and that strips away all the botanicals, brings it back again to the raw spirit you can use again for distilling. Is what's supposed to happen. But actually, Cali, we're in a really small space at our distillery, and Cali isn't tall enough to strip everything away. So there is actually still a little bit of gin left when we've finished rectifying with Cali. So rather than use those rectified tails in our own gin, because of that, we give it to the students at Heriot-Watt University, not to drink. They use it for their coursework instead. But we do try to be fairly green at Edinburgh Gin. As I say, we're doing our rectifying there. All the burnt botanicals at the end of distillation, they get taken away and turned into biofuel. So yeah, we do try to be quite green there. Yeah, hopefully that all made sense, and that gave you a good idea of our actual kind of distilling process there. And we're going to be moving on to trying something a little bit different in a sec, but it's worth saying that all the gins we've had so far are very much traditional London dry gins. And London dry, that very classic kind of gin, all the botanicals are distilled there. Nothing is added after distillation except water. A London dry has to be 37.5% ABV or above. All ours have been 43%, so we're within there. And that's kind of been the style of gin. Really, since the Victorians established London dry as a style of gin, that has been the predominant style for most of the kind of modern history of gin. Even to this day, about 85% of the gins in the market are London dry gins. And then there were gin liqueurs, which I can talk about a little bit in a sec if you want to as well. We consider ourselves one of the pioneers of gin liqueurs, but they are liqueurs, they are 20% alcohol. They're not really gins, though our ones just happen to have our gin in as an alcoholic base. But now there's a new kid on the block. There is flavoured gin. And that was never really something that we did. It was what other distilleries did. We've got our London dries, we've got our liqueurs, that's it. I won't mention the name of the other distilleries that are more well known for doing flavoured gins, but you know who I mean. So we thought, okay, we're going to try something different. We're going to bring out a flavoured gin. And this was already from a lot of feedback from customers on tastings like this, on tastings in the distillery. Our rhubarb and ginger gin liqueur, which is 20%, is very sweet. That was our most popular liqueur. People said, hey, you thought about making a gin with that? So we did. We brought out our rhubarb and ginger gin. And yeah, if you've got it there, give it a wee taste. Now, this is something a little bit different. As you can see there, it is 40% ABV, so slightly less boozy than the liqueurs. I'm checking, it is the rhubarb and ginger gin that we're having on this tasting, Craig, isn't it? It's not the liqueur.
Correct, it's the gin. So we've
it is the gin.
Just correct.
I saw a comment there about liqueurs and drinking them, and I was like, just double check, this is the gin that we're drinking, that's fine. So yeah, rhubarb and ginger gin, like we did before, give it a smell, give it a sip, and yeah, let me know what you think. And then for this one, you can stick a wedge of lime in there if you happen to have a lime. And tonic goes very well with this. I think a light tonic is really nice with this, but you could also stick ginger ale in with this one too. And yeah, just on that question earlier about the difference between liqueurs and gins. So our gin liqueurs are 20% alcohol. They're very sweet. There's a minimum sugar content with liqueurs. So as a result, they are very sweet. I'm just seeing if behind my bar, I've got my rhubarb and ginger gin. There's my rhubarb and ginger gin liqueur. Oh, there it is at the very back. So there we go. So these are the two here. So yeah, the liqueur, 20% alcohol, much sweeter. With this, you could stick it in a gin and tonic if you wanted to, but most people tend to put this in cocktails. The most popular pairing with this in the UK is in sparkling wine, in like Prosecco or in Cava, and that's how a lot of people tend to drink it. This one, do not stick this in your sparkling wine. You're going to have a stinking hangover the next day if you put the same amount of this as you would the liqueur. As I say, this is twice the strength. It's got a lot less sugar in it, so more of the flavour of the gin is coming through, and those natural flavours, the fruit too. And yeah, I would make a gin and tonic with this. I would make cocktails with this. It makes a fantastic mojito, actually. So yeah, you can be quite experimental with this. We brought this out in 2019, and as you might have seen in the slide there, it won a gold medal. It won the gold medal at the International Wine and Spirits competition. Now, if you know a bit about these guys, they are quite traditional. They're quite old school when it comes to spirits. So to them to award a gold medal to a flavoured gin was quite an unusual thing to do. And it was awarded, if I've got this right, 96.3%, which is the highest they've awarded any flavoured gin. So bringing out a flavoured gin into a market where there were already quite a few flavoured gins, getting that kind of feedback from our peers, we just thought this is fantastic, and it's given us the courage to bring out other flavoured gins as a result. Before we move on to another flavoured gin, what are our thoughts on this one? Craig, you must have had the rhubarb and ginger liqueur before. That's so popular.
Only had it when we went back to Scotland about 3 years ago on holiday. So, because it was everywhere, like everybody was talking about Edinburgh gin, but mostly the liqueurs they were talking about. I think Edinburgh, every bar you went into, it just, yeah, it was everybody was talking about it, and it must have been like either it was a big promotion or everybody was loving it, and it felt like everybody was loving drinking it. That was the thing, you know. And we actually bought a couple of bottles to bring back with us. My wife really loved it. She was really into it as well, and we didn't see it here for a very long time, you know, like we were like, oh, where is it, you know? It's but it, yeah, nice and sweet, and yeah, it was good. It was great, and that was our first introduction to Edinburgh gin. So yeah, definitely. This one here.
Talk about classic being the most popular gin, but our biggest selling product still is rhubarb and ginger liqueur.
Yeah, well, there you go.
It outsells everything.
We'll have that on next week from Wednesday. So we've just been having problems with post here, us receiving stuff, and it was us sending it out, but now it's us receiving stuff for some reason. So we're trying to get on top of that. So it's been delayed. But this one here, I love. It's got this beautiful sweetness on it where it's not too sweet. It's like a fake sweetness, because it like, you know, that rhubarb you get with the rhubarb and the sweeties that you get with the rhubarb on the outside and the
rhubarb and custard sweets. Yeah,
that's what this is. But it's not that potent sweetness. It's like that taste. But and then I think like it gives you this beautiful big push as it goes into your palate, like just this big bang of flavour, and then just really dries nicely. So yeah. But even at that drying, I think it's got that custardy effect on it. So good, really nice.
If you want a drink that tastes like rhubarb and custard sweets, pair that with cream soda. And yeah, it's rhubarb and custard in a glass, really. Yeah. So, like I say, the confidence that, as I say, liqueurs is what we're known for, but because this went so well, it sold so well, it's been awarded so highly, that gave us the courage to, after we brought out the rhubarb and ginger, to bring out our lemon and jasmine gin. So we're going to march straight onto that one. So don't worry, you don't have to drink all your rhubarb and ginger just now. But yeah, if you've got another glass out there, and pour yourself out a lemon and jasmine, which, to be honest, is probably, I would say that and the raspberry gin are my two favourites of our full strength flavoured gins. The lemon and jasmine, I spent quite a lot of time in Italy, and the lemon and jasmine to me just tastes like gin infused with limoncello. I think it's a gorgeous gin. And again, because it is that little bit fruitier, there's a kind of sweetness there, you can get away with pairing this with lemon wedge rather than just lemon pure. But yeah, I think as well for this one, there's still a lot of the gin flavour coming through as well. Whereas, to be quite honest, with the rhubarb and ginger, because rhubarb is such a strong flavour, that's kind of taking over. With this one, there is more of a balance with it kind of coming through. I think as well, the difference is with our full strength flavoured gins. Now, we don't do this with all of them at the moment, but we're getting that way, is that a lot of distilleries will just take their gin and they'll add all the kind of flavouring in after distillation. With lemon and jasmine, we've started doing it. With our raspberry, we do it in particular, we will actually distill the fruit. And so because you're distilling it and really all you're adding after distillation is a little bit of sugar, it's got much more depth of flavour to it than a lot of the other kind of flavoured gins that you tend to get these days. And that means it stands up a bit more to doing quite gin-forward cocktails with it still, or, you know, doing things where it's kind of a bit more on show, I suppose. I'm just seeing lemon sherbet there in the comments too. Totally agree with that. Yeah, it's got that lovely zinginess to it, I think. I think this is what I'm going to make myself a G&T with at the end of the tasting. Are you a limoncello fan, Craig?
I usually don't like the stuff that you get commercially. I like
no, I make it at home. Yeah,
I like a lot of people who make it at home. Yeah, it's like, yeah, I like that. I like that. Just somebody who's authentic and just goes and does something like that. And yeah, so I tend to like it more in that scenario. So I tend to play more in that scenario. I don't really buy any. Yeah, and the yuzu type liqueurs now I've been trying because you don't see them as much of people making them, and I sometimes think they're a bit too much though. But certainly, yeah, limoncello is good.
Yeah, yuzu is just so much more flavour, isn't it? Yeah, I every Christmas I always do big batches of either limoncello or arancello, or I did a pampelmoncello last Christmas, a grapefruit one, and yeah, I love making these things. They're fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Real. So yeah, again, you could do quite sort of Italian inspired cocktails with it. I know that Australia has quite a big Italian population. So yeah, you could do kind of really kind of fun, summer kind of zingy kind of cocktails. Always really fun. Mm-hmm. So while we're sipping away at those two, I think we'll dive into, because I've talked quite a lot actually about like the history of gin in Edinburgh and all this kind of thing, but I haven't actually talked about Edinburgh gin itself, and I think that's worth talking about. So Edinburgh gin, it starts with this couple here, just above me there. We've got Alex and Jane Nicol. Yeah, Alex and Jane, they're the people who kicked Edinburgh gin off to begin with. I said 2009 was that big year for gin. We didn't start in 2009. We started in 2005 with Alex and Jane, who had both worked in the alcohol industry for many years, and their kids had grown up, flown the nest, and they thought, great, we'll do what we've always wanted to do. We'll start our very own alcohol company, which sounds very grand, but literally all Alex and Jane did was they bought the rights to two blended whiskies, Pig's Nose and Sheep Dip. Again, you might know them as whiskey drinkers, and they sold them out the back of their car at various food and drink fairs around the UK. They didn't do it on their own. They did it with the help of the company's first ever brand ambassador. So I'm now the brand ambassador for Edinburgh Gin, but our first brand ambassador, probably our most successful, his name was Doug, and he was a dog. And yeah, annoyingly, I think Doug the dog sold more gin than me, I think. I haven't got a waggy tail, so. Yeah, with him, they went selling their stuff at food fairs and drink fairs and stuff. And they were doing quite well. And then that law change came in 2009. In 2010, they had enough money together and they launched our classic gin. That was the very first thing that we ever brought out. And yeah, it was a hit. It was a massive hit. In fact, it got so big, it got a bit too big for Alex and Jane. A shop called John Lewis, which you might know in the UK, said, we love your gin, we'd like to stock it in every single one of our stores in the UK. And at that point, Alex and Jane thought, right, okay, this has got too big for us, we're going to sell up. And they sold us to Ian McLeod Distillers, which is who we're part of now. And that's what the photo up in the top there is. That is Alex with our big boss now, Leonard Russell. and he is the head of Ian McLeod Distillers, again, another family company. And I'm not allowed to say how much Alex and Jane sold the company for, but they never need to worry about working ever again. Let's just put it like that. And so, yeah, they sold us to Ian McLeod Distillers, again, a family company run by the Russells since the 1930s. And when I say they're a family company, they really are. My cousin used to work in the distillery, and my dad, until quite recently, was technical manager at the bottlers. So, yeah, it is very much a kind of, and you'll find that throughout the company, a lot of us are related to one another, which is quite nice in this day and age to have a kind of a slightly old-fashioned kind of family company like that, I think. Now, you might know Ian McLeod Distillers because they are more well known as whiskey. They are perhaps most well known for Glengoyne whiskey, for Tandu. We're just in the process of reopening Rosebank Whiskey Distillery. We have Smokehead whiskey as well. But the thing is, they're actually a big family of gin drinkers, particularly Leonard's father, Peter. Peter just retired a few years ago there at 92. But Peter is a massive gin fan, to the extent he actually has a tonic fridge in his office. And company board meetings, it's not tea and coffee and hobnobs that's served, it's gin and tonics. So they were very excited to get gin on board, and they really wanted to promote it. But like I say, they were more known for whiskey as a family, so they weren't sure how to promote their gin. But if the name Russell rings any bells for anyone, Leonard's sister, Peter's daughter, Lucinda Russell, is a very famous racehorse trainer. So that same year that they bought Edinburgh Gin, they said to Lucinda, could we maybe sponsor one of the horses that you're training? So they took a horse called One for Arthur, and that's in there. And they put him in Edinburgh Gin livery, in an Edinburgh Gin horse box, and entered him in the Grand National that year. And he won. And it was fantastic, because in all the press interviews, they're saying to Lucinda and her partner, Peter Scudamore, quite a famous jockey, they were saying to them, my goodness, you've won the Grand National. How are you going to celebrate? Why, with an Edinburgh Gin and Tonic, of course. And we were like, ka-ching. Suddenly, everybody has heard of Edinburgh Gin, and you can almost plot it from there, really, from the Grand National win. Suddenly, all these people are hearing about Edinburgh Gin. And now, from being a gin that was really just sold in the central belt of Scotland, we sell Edinburgh Gin throughout the UK, throughout Europe, particularly in Germany. We sell it in the US, we sell it in the Middle East in some places. And yeah, we've just started in the last few years selling it in Australia, which is, I think, pretty good going for a gin that was, you know, sold out the back of a couple's car originally. And really all in thanks to a dog and a horse. So, you know, pretty good for origin story, I would say. Oh, thank you, Reece. Thank you for the bravo there. Thank you. Before we kind of sort of wrap things up with our kind of last drink, we're going to be moving on to our martini, which this is more kind of Craig's creation. So I'm interested to kind of pass this over to Craig in a sec. Just wanted to quickly talk about the future for Edinburgh Gin. Like I said earlier, our distillery is a bit too small for us. It's getting to the point where it's a bit tricky to kind of work in. And a good reason for you all to come to Edinburgh in the next year or two is you can come and visit this, our brand new distillery, which we're just about to start work on the next month or so. And yeah, we've got all sorts of cool things here. So as you can see, much bigger distillery, much more room there. It's going to triple our capacity for distilling. We've got a lovely rooftop bar there as well with amazing views across the city. There's going to be a garden there where we'll grow our own botanicals and distill them in the stills down below. And yeah, it's just going to be really cool. We should be starting work on that in May, and that's going to take us about 1.5 years. So yeah, if you're going to come visit Edinburgh, come anytime after the sort of kind of autumn next year, and come visit our new distillery, and come say you're on the online tasting with Phil, and I'll give you some extra gin if you do. But yeah, Craig, this is your call now, the martini.
The first time
I only wish I was joining you. What's going on here? What have you done?
The first time I've ever actually made a cocktail. So I'm not from a bar background, but I spoke with Philip here, and we thought, well, we thought the rhubarb one may be the most popular, seeing as it's the most popular with the liqueur, and so I had to do and I wanted to try and put them in these packs and send them out. So you get 40 ml of cocktail. Well, if you've got it in the fridge, go grab it from the fridge now. If you've got it out, then pour it out. The way that it's to be drank is putting the dry lemon inside the glass. Or if you've got a martini glass, use the martini glass. And if you've got a little bit of salt, just a tiny little dot of it on the edge of the glass or something like that. Salt's always nice with a cocktail, really brings out those flavors of the rhubarb. But what we did with this was we've taken, so it's really 50 parts Edinburgh gin to sort of 50 mil Edinburgh gin, usually to 15 mil of dry vermouth. Don't buy a good vermouth. Like we've tried so many different vermouths, the guys here, and they're just like, unless you can find something that's made locally, go for that one. If not, it doesn't really matter. We sort of feel that vermouth's vermouth, but the gin on this one really shines through. And then the lemon just sort of like accompanies all those rhubarb and ginger flavors.
Someone's got a proper cocktail shaker on the go. I'm seeing on Scott's one there.
I like
Fantastic.
that idea. I wish I had that.
Proper glasses as well.
I was quite impressed by this when I actually drank it. I'm not a cocktail drinker. I only drink old-fashioned cocktails. I measure my bar based on an old-fashioned cocktail. So every bar I go into, I'll order one, and if I like it, then I'll rate the bar highly. If I don't, then I'll never go back. But having something like this that I've never really had before, I really enjoyed it, and I thought, particularly the point that I made it. So I'm sort of thinking I maybe should try some other cocktails when I go out. But if you go on the Edinburgh Gin website, every single gin on that website has a cocktail recipe. And not only a cocktail recipe, an easy guide to what you need to buy, how you need to do things, and how you need to put things together. And most things are only like maybe there's just 3 instructions of what you need to do. So, and they don't really tell you need anything fancy to mix them together or anything. But obviously, if you want to do that with friends around or family around, but just a great place to go. And we have mucked around with a few cocktails now here, just the team, because it's there, it's easy. It's easy to get into. So it's just edinburghgin.com/recipes. Boom, they're all there. So and you can jump in. With this one here, the vermouth comes through, but I think that it just really brings out those rhubarb and ginger flavors to it, particularly the lemon as well. So I hope you enjoy it. If you don't, I'll give up my cocktail making.
I mentioned earlier, Chloe and the distillery a lot. What's great is that our team tend to come from backgrounds that in different ways feed into what we do. So I come from an acting background, which is maybe not too surprising. But yeah, having people in the team who know so much about cocktails, they've written all that content that's on the website. That's our own folk who've written that.
It seems like it would be a lot of fun, to sit and I think that anybody who's on here tonight, it's something that, grab. Most of them have only got another bottle of something. Look for ones that have one other ingredient. Like this one's just vermouth. So there's a vermouth, there's, whatever you need to buy, and have a bit of fun with them. It's actually good fun. I would imagine the more you drink, it will get funner until but yeah, it's good. And mix them with garnishes as well. Like you don't need to use that garnish, you can use any garnish you want and muck around with it, like you said, with the chasing the gins neat and adding that garnish in there. Like muck around with that, see what you think's good, see what tonic, what soda water is good. I was just saying to the guys, in Australia we've got a company called Strange Love, and they do a yuzu sugar-free soda, and they also do a cucumber soda. So the cucumber soda is fantastic for having with gin, particularly the first gin. It goes really well with it. So it's exploring different tonics, it's exploring soda water and flavored soda water, and yeah, so lots of fun with this. Yeah, I think we could have more fun with this here, and possibly do a gin tasting in the future again, and do it maybe 3 or 4 cocktails. Forget about the neat gin, and possibly send everybody a cocktail shaker, a strainer, and then you've got it all, and you can have a bit of fun with it actually on live. So it might be a bit of fun.
Yeah. And this is the great thing, actually. I mean, I think I maybe said this at the beginning, but having this set up with a bar, because I mean, prior to this, I was doing this in my spare bedroom, and it wasn't it wasn't such a glamorous setup for doing online tastings from. But having the full bar set up here, we can do that. We can make cocktails at the same time and do that all along. So yeah, that'd be so much fun. I'd be very much up for that.
I think we do that. I think it's something we do. And somebody was saying to me, "Oh, you're doing gin. We're coming into winter soon." And it's like, it never really gets that cold in Australia, really. It's gin time all year here. We seem to think there's a whiskey season, but I think that gin's got its place even right through the winter, even in Melbourne. So.
Again, as whiskey drinkers, there are winter whiskies and there are summer whiskies, aren't there? I mean, there are winter and summer gins, I would say, just the same. I would tend to, in the kind of colder, darker months, I tend to have things like Christmas gin, funnily enough, which is nice and spicy. I have Cannonball, I have rhubarb and ginger, that kind of thing. Whereas in the summery months, I'll have Seaside, or I'll have lemon and jasmine, or classic. So, yeah. Definitely
good time for gin. And again, not somewhere we've really explored. It's been bitty, and but going through a whole range of gin and talking with the rep here, we'll basically contact him more, get more going, I think, because we've really enjoyed it. So thank you for letting me geek out at you for just over an hour. Linda said, great cocktail, real warmth in it, brilliant for the winter, put a heat in you. This is actually a winter cocktail. I've seen a few people mention it and saying that they use this in winter, so definitely true. It's definitely more of a winter thing, but certainly one I wanted to do because it was easy to put in the packs, plus we were using the rhubarb, which I thought was important to use that one because it might be the favourite of the night. But in regards to, is the Christmas gin available all year round in Australia? Is the Christmas gin here? I'm not sure. I don't think we've been offered it.
Yeah, funnily enough, I don't know why this is, but Christmas was the first thing that we sold in Australia,
right,
before Classic. So you can definitely get it in Australia, and they might not have it on the shelves out with Christmas. But yeah, if you just go to the shop, your local Edinburgh gin supplier, or buying it through yourselves, you'll have it in stock. Just you're maybe not pushing it at this time of year.
To really kind of push why we seen Edinburgh Gin now. Edinburgh Gin has been here for a few years, but it's only been available in the supermarkets here, in the big corporate supermarkets. And because we have really big, large corporate bottle shops over here, Philip, I don't know if you know, and it's been in there. But recently, an independent importer has been able to bring it in, that along with Glengoyne whiskey. So we're going to do a lot of work with them in regards to the gin, because we've not really had much going because it's been in the supermarkets. And in, I'm going to get this right, in May, can't remember the date at the moment in May, but we'll send out a newsletter. We're going to have a huge Glengoyne tasting as well. Not only a Glengoyne tasting, but we've got a single cask Glengoyne tasting in there. So you'll taste a single cask Glengoyne, and you'll taste the teapot dram, which is only available at the distillery.
I love the teapot.
So we have,
there's such a good story with teapot. I won't tell you what it is. You'll wait for that for the tasting. But
you got to tune into it. But it is the top whiskey out of Scotland, the Highlands of Scotland, I should say. But it will be great. It will be in May. So look out for the newsletter for that. I'll probably sell out hotcakes as well. But more work with that. I mean, the other one's Tamdhu. These guys also own and operate the Tamdhu distillery, so we'll also have that on board later in the year when there's more whiskey available from the distillery. It's definitely been very good playing around with the gin, understanding the company, and also understanding gin more for me. That's been great. Yeah.
I think people think with gin they just knock a few botanicals together and that'll do, but hopefully you've gained an idea that there is just the same amount of love and care and attention going into a bottle of gin as there is into a bottle of whiskey.
Definitely.
A good bottle of gin. Yeah.
Definitely. You just don't need to wait for it, which is good. So in regards to a whiskey in a barrel, do you mature?
Oh, I didn't really talk about that, did I? So so Geneva, the Genevas that you tend to buy these days, one of my favorites is Phyllis, which is a Belgian Geneva, that is cask aged. And actually I was at a drinks festival in Amsterdam in October, and I had a 30-year-old casked aged Geneva. So it's the oldest any gin has ever been cask aged before, 30 years old. And it tasted phenomenal, because it was like, obviously it was like having a 30-year-old whiskey, which in itself is really good, but then there's all the flavor of the botanicals coming in from the gin as well. And yeah, it was brilliant. They wouldn't let me take home a bottle of 30-year-old, but I did manage to do a sneaky wee swap for a bottle of 17-year-old. So I've got that in the house, and it's delicious, really nice.
Sounds amazing. Yeah, I should start. We've got a lot of gin distilleries here, like an abundance, like in Scotland,
and a lot of whiskey distilleries.
Yeah, and whiskey distilleries. They're just everywhere. But I think that's worth doing now. Maybe it's worth. But in the barrels here, it doesn't last as long. There's a higher evaporation rate in Australia, so but it might be worth venturing into and finding out if we can do something like that. You know?
It is unusual to cask age gin for that long. Most people, when they cask age a gin, they only do it for 6 months to a year. So the only thing that we've done so far, cask aging, and you guys definitely cannot have this because it's only being sold in Edinburgh. We've just brought out an experimental series of 3 different gins. We brought out an Old Tom gin, a salt and sauce gin, which, if you know Edinburgh, that's what we have on our chips. We have brown sauce.
You have to talk about that. You have to talk about that more. Not everybody will know.
We'll need to send some over to Australia. That's what we need to do. And then this is the only cast aged one that we've done. It's a Cranachan gin. So you might know Cranachan is a Scottish dessert with raspberries and whiskey and honey and oats and cream. So what we've done is we've taken a whole load of Perthshire's finest raspberries. We've put them in a cask, in a Glengoyne cask, for 6 months with our gin, along with some toasted oats, and then a little bit of honey in there at the end. And it's a liquid dessert. It is beautiful, really, really nice. This is number 3 in the experimental range, the Cranachan gin. But yeah, that's the only cast aged gin we've ever done so far. You're taking a note of that. You're like, how do I get bottles of this over here?
Next tasting, we'll get one bottle
here's
over.
The promise, Craig. If I can come and do one in person in Australia, I'll put a couple of bottles of this in my case. There you go.
That's what we want then, yeah. Yeah, we'll talk to Cameron and organise it, because everybody can travel now, as long as you're, I think.
Yeah.
Is it
exactly
four times vaccinated to get into Australia? I think.
Oh, is it? All right, we've only got. We're just about to have our 4th. My granny's getting her 4th in like a week or so. So I think we're a few months behind the 4th. But yeah.
Wow, I think we're at 3 at the moment. I'm actually not quite sure anymore. I'm not. But yeah, it's been tough times to travel. But I think over the past 2 years, gin and whiskey have kept us kind of on our toes, and everybody's been enjoying tasting.
I think I've actually taken part, and I'm not just saying like in my actual work capacity. I think I've taken part in more drinks events during the pandemic than I did prior to that, because I'm a big whiskey drinker. I'm a member of a thing called the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, and I did loads of online tastings, and they sell really nice Armagnac, and I really like Armagnac, so I bought quite a few bottles of Armagnac from them as well. Did quite a few tastings on it too. So yeah, a lot of my lockdown was just drinking.
Fantastic. That's the way to do it. Just learning about new spirits, etc. It's been brilliant. Yeah. I'm going to open this up to the floor now. If anybody wants to ask a question, either in the chat or you want to take yourself off mute, you're more than welcome to. I guess it's just more about raise your hand, and we'll try and get some questions in here if we've not covered anything.
Oh, very polite. We've got a hand being raised on Scotland now. That was with our proper cocktail glass as well. Hello.
Hi, it's Emma actually, not Scott.
Hi, Emma. I did think you didn't look like a Scot.
Yeah, it's a bit of an odd one. I just wanted to know about the classic gin. Could you remind me about the botanicals on that one? That was just delicious.
Yeah, it's actually quite a complex gin for being, the classic gin. So it's got 14 different botanicals in there. So it's got North Macedonian juniper in it, which is giving it some of that natural sweetness. It's a London dry, so it's also got coriander seed and angelica root in there. It's quite citrus forward, so it's got bitter orange peel, it's got lime peel, and it's got lemongrass. It's got a little bit of spice in there. It's got cassia bark. It's got the lavender and the pine buds and the milk thistle. So all nice kind of Scottish things. It's got hazelnuts in there to give it some texture. And then finally, orris root, which orris root is more famously in Chanel No. 5. It's a fantastic smell and flavour preservative in the gin.
You use angelica and orris root. So which one's your fixative?
So I would say the angelica is the fixative. It's the traditional fixative in London dries. And for most, that's enough of a fixative, but we add the orris root in there as a kind of extra fixative. So yeah, I suppose they're both doing that job, I would say, but more the orris than the angelica.
Right, thank you.
That's all right.
Thanks, Emma. Anyone else?
They were like, I don't have Emma's knowledge. I can't ask such an intelligent question.
Other than
you can just
gin,
say, I thought it was lovely. It was really nice.
other than gin, what do you recommend for a mixer? Sorry, other than tonic water.
So sorry, which gin for a pizza was it, Reese?
Whichever, gin. What do you recommend for a mixer other than tonic water?
Oh, a mixer, sorry. I was like, which goes with the pizza? Other than tonic water. Well, Craig mentioned it earlier, soda is really good. I think ginger ale is great, particularly with the rhubarb and ginger. It sounds like you've got, your tonic game is even better in Australia than it is here. We don't really get yuzu tonics here. So I would say have an experiment with some of these other kind of flavoured tonics. Just be wary of the fact that if it's a really flavoured mixer, then it has the danger of overpowering, particularly a more lighter gin. So I always tend to err on the side of having a lighter mixer, like a soda, like a light tonic. You can also drink gin neat. We've only drank gin with tonic for the last 100 years. Up until then, everybody drank gin neat. And for Cannonball, and also there's one we do in the Botanic Garden, 1670, I drink them like it would a dram. I might have a nice cube or two in there, but that is it. And that generally is how I tend to drink them, is I drink them neat. So
Great,
yeah.
thank you very much. I think I like the rhubarb one the best out of all of them. That's just personally. Then probably ends classic after that one.
Yeah. Oh, we should have a bit of a, maybe people can just let us know verbally or they can stick in the chat. But yeah, what were the favourite gins?
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
I like the rhubarb and ginger,
Mm-hmm.
and I loved the cocktail. Absolutely loved the cocktail.
Oh, don't say that, Linda. That's the one I can't have.
I missed out on the classic gin because I had trouble connecting, but I'll try that later. I also like the jasmine. It had a really nice flavour. There was a flavour in it that I couldn't detect. It was something like a lolly I ate as a kiddie, but I couldn't think of the lolly, but it was there. I could taste the lemon. And it was really nice with the lemon round the top of the glass. I tried that, rubbing that. It was really nice. And I'm really glad about this tasting event. Most of them's been whiskey, but I love the gin. I was looking forward to it so much.
Good. Glad to have another gin fan. Yeah, I love lemon and jasmine. Oh, John's got a hand up. How do I unmute myself?
I'll just unmute myself. Firstly, Philip, thank you very much. It's a brilliant session.
Thanks.
Firstly, I love the Cannonball the best. That blew me away. I'm not sure what Marianne thought, but
I loved it too.
Yeah. Just if you could please comment on temperature. We've been used to putting gins in the fridge, and I know I sent an email off to the good folk at the whiskey company asking, should we put these in the fridge? And the response was, look, do whatever you like. But is there a recommendation? How does it change the flavour profile?
So some people talk about putting gins in the fridge or the freezer or things like that. My only thing is that's not how the distiller designed you to drink it, unless it specifically says that on the bottle. And I'm noticing that more with certain whiskies, where they say put it in the fridge, but none of our gins do we ever say best kept in the fridge. So I would say serve at room temperature. If you want it a bit cooler, maybe stick an ice cube or two in. But yeah, I suppose the liqueurs, because they are liqueurs, you could probably keep those in the fridge, and the liqueurs are quite nice chilled. But yeah, I would just keep the gins themselves somewhere room temperature.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thanks. It was quite interesting. It was the same with whiskey. We tried. I've been around. Jason must be around 88 distilleries now in Scotland, and tried a lot of the spirit from those distilleries. And we went to Glencairn, and he had a whiskey in there, and he let us taste a whiskey chilled, and said to us, "Which whiskey is this?" And we said, "Oh, it's the 15-year-old. We know that, And then he brought another one out, and it was chilled, and I tasted it, and he said, "Which whiskey is that?" And I had no idea, and I felt really bad about it because we import Glencairn to Australia, and we're puzzling over it, myself and my wife, and my wife's got a really good palate, and she still couldn't get it, and said, "No, we're stumped. We don't know what it is." And he said, "It's just the 15-year-old again, but it's at 5 degrees." So it was just completely different from room temperature to 5 degrees. And then he let us taste the spirit in the same circumstance, and again, completely different. And you're like, wow, it just shows you that putting it in the fridge or drinking it when it's cold outside it just makes a huge difference to that spirit or that whiskey or that gin. So it's, I think sometimes with cooling anything is, try it at room temperature, and play with your spirit, because it really does change from any temperature that sits in. I mean, myself, I like gin with like crushed ice, like just that, like completely crushed up ice in the glass with gin, and then your soda water in there, etc. And I'm not quite sure, but I think that's just not been my education towards gin, because recently it seems to be more straight. I really want to, like Philip said, try it straight, try it with a bit of garnish, then try it now then start playing around with it. And I think I'm going to start to do that more, because it just means you got to drink a lot of gin. What's wrong with that?
We have a question from Cherry Ripe, which might be my favourite name of the evening.
Sorry about that. That's my daughter's joke, setting my profile up. She thinks it's funny. I haven't actually got a question. I just had a comment. I have a friend who has made gin in the past, and I really enjoyed your gins. The rhubarb and ginger was probably my favourite, closely followed by lemon and jasmine. I drink a lot of lemon and jasmine tea, so I love the flavours. So yeah, I definitely will look at purchasing, and I just want to thank you all for organising this. I think it was an amazing experience to taste them all.
Thank you. Glad you enjoyed it.
This is great, and it's the fact that I can be here in Edinburgh and you guys are over there, and we're all in the same space together. I think it's fantastic.
And my name's actually Wendy. Sorry.
You'll always be Cherry to me.
Thank you.
Oh, it's all right. Any more questions, Tom? No? Yeah, I think looking through the notes, I think the rhubarb and ginger has been really probably one of the favourites, but certainly the classic comes up a fair bit. And I would imagine, again, like you said, the classic's the one that really represents what you do, and it was great to start with that. It was really, really nice and refreshing on the palate. It was great, nice and clean. Definitely good.
Yeah, no, it is. It's just there's a reason why it's the most popular gin. I think it's just such a nice, easy drinking gin. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. And then so from next week, we'll have the liqueurs on, and then we will. I'll ask about the Christmas gin. We haven't been offered it, so I'll get on top of that.
You can definitely buy it in Australia. I know that.
Definitely. I'll have a look for that one as well, the importers, and we'll chase the experimental gin as well.
I think you're just going to have to get me to bring it over personally. I think that's the only way you're going to get to try some. Sorry.
It might be a face-to-face. We started. We had a lot of face-to-face classes prior to the pandemic, and then we moved to online tasting, and then we'll probably move to having both in the future. So probably starting in June, we'll start to do face-to-face and hopefully get people like Philip coming over from the UK and presenting in front of us. But I'd just like to thank Philip. He got up very early this morning. He did say to me that he doesn't think he's been up that early for many, many years. And me as not a morning person, I can just thank him heartily but for waking up at that time, because I struggle to wake up at that time in the morning. But thank you. You've done a great job, and I think the background and the area that you're doing the presentation in looks amazing. You've done well in setting all that up as well. So thanks very much.
Before this, we were showing Craig earlier, but we've almost sort of got like a mini TV studio set up here. So hopefully, if we do another one of these online tastings, I'll have Dave, the head distiller, with me. And so we can switch between making up some cocktails and actually chatting to the guy himself who makes all our gins for us. So that'll be our aim for our next one.
Definitely, that's it. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. And thank you again to Philip. It's been wonderful to have you on here. We're going to close off there. We do have, like I said, next week, we've got the Hyde Irish Whiskey Tasting pre-St. Paddy's Day event. So we're going to have a bit of fun with that one. There'll be a few terrible Irish jokes on there, I'm quite sure. The week after, 2 weeks after that, will be Pulteney. So we'll be taking you to the Pulteney Distillery live and talking about Pulteney whiskey, and then obviously Glengoyne coming up as well. So thank you very much. Thank you, Philip. And everyone, have a wonderful night.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Cheers. Slajava.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Yes.
Good night.
Or a good day, Philip.
Thank you. I'm off to get breakfast now.
Salt and sauce.
Yeah, I'll just have some gin. I mean, I might as well just carry on. Yeah.
Enjoy.
Bacon and eggs.
I'm going to head off just now as well, but Craig, can you send me the recording if that's all right, please?
Definitely, I'll send that through.